All right, so we've got a 24 Polaris Sportsman 450 here, and this thing needs front wheel bearings on it, as well as some other stuff. So we've got a ton of play in the front, wheel bearings on both sides, as well as the prop shaft going up to the front diff. These U-joints have a lot of play, and they're making all sorts of noise. So if you hear a lot of tink, 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 tink noise when you're driving, a lot of times it's these prop shafts. Not as common in the Sportsmans, but very common in the Rangers and stuff. So we're going to go through what it takes to replace these components, and this would be the same as any of these 450 Sportsmans, the 570s, anything with this McPherson strut style front suspension, even the older 500, 800 Sportsmans, pretty much all of the older Sportsmans as well. This process will be the same to replace these front bearings, as well as that prop shaft on it. So yeah, this thing, yeah, it's only a 24, but it's got 4,500 miles on it, and then like 900 hours. Yeah, 869 hours, and yep, 4,500 miles, 4,600 miles. So the problem with this one though is it was used on a feedlot, so basically it spent its entire life driving through cow crap and everything, and that stuff is so acidic and just tears stuff up, rusts things out. So super common on something like this, unfortunately. So let's get this thing on the lift and start tearing it apart. Okay, so we've got it up on the lift here. Just pulled the wheels off quick. Doesn't matter how much I wash stuff, there's always still dirt and crap everywhere. So what we are gonna do here is get this bearing out. So first thing we're gonna do is pull this brake caliper off. There are 2 screws on the bottom side, or on the back side here. Those are a 1/2 inch drive. We'll pop that off, pull this steering tie rod end off, as well as pull the hub off and start pulling this thing apart here. So let me get those things off, we'll move on to the next steps. All right, let's pull this steering link off. So this is a 15mm bolt there on the top and the bottom. Nice and easy there. We're gonna pull this outer hub off. We'll take our cotter pin out of the way. This is a 27mm nut on this thing. The hub should slide off. Yep, nice and easy there. Well, somebody's actually put some grease down inside here, so that's a good thing. So next step is to loosen up this A-arm. So there's basically one nut down here. This is a 9/16 nut. So we're going to pop that off, and then we're going to pound down on here with a punch and a big hammer, and that'll pop loose. Alright, got a nut off. Now I take a punch, kind of about right there. Hit this thing good and hard, and usually a couple good whacks and it comes off. 2 whacks, just like that. Now this is free. Now the next step is we're going to loosen up these 2 1/2 inch bolts here, and this strut is going to slide off of the shock part itself there, and then we can pull this whole bearing assembly out. We don't need to fully remove these, just loosen them up. It just clamps down onto the shock tube itself. There's a little bit of spring tension on there, not much. There it went. Now, slide this whole thing off. There's a little ring here that kind of holds on, so don't lose that. Okay, now we've got our whole strut out, so now we can pull this bearing out. Okay, so we got the strut here and the vise. So basically this bearing is just held in with a big old snap ring. You want a good snap ring pliers to pull it out. So funny story on one of these, I was pulling one of these things out one time and kind of was prying out with a screwdriver to get to pop out of the groove, and all of a sudden it sprung off, and then I never heard it hit the ground, and I was like looking, never found the dumb thing. And then maybe a couple weeks later I found it. It was stuck in the wall, and it's kind of been up there for a few years now. So I guess in case I ever lose one, I know where to find one. Okay, so let's get this snap ring pulled out and then press this bearing out. So a little press like this works excellent to push these bearings out. If you don't have a press, you can definitely just pound it out with a big hammer. But sometimes they're kind of stuck in there. And there's our old bearing. So here's our new bearing. On these things, I usually just tap them in with a hammer and stuff. You can definitely use a press. It's just a little hard to get this thing kind of squared up in a press typically. So we'll drive this thing back in and throw our snap ring back in there, and then this bearing's installed. All right, just like that. New bearings installed. So now we can put this whole strut back together. Okay, let's put this strut back on, put this collar back on. We're going to slide this back in there. Alright, so this shock tower is going to slide all the way back down to where it was at before. Like I said before, there was a little bit of tension on it. So we're going to install the arm first here. Put this nut back on. If this bottom nut's secure, we're going to put the hub back in place next. So our shock and everything is still loose up here. We're going to tighten this nut back down to 27 millimeter. Now here's a little trick to get this thing lined back up. I'm gonna put a jack stand, so I still got this jacked up. I'm gonna take a little pressure off the jack, slide down, and then put some pressure back on that shock. And then what we can do is kind of slide the shock back down in place, back to where you can see the original mark was at. So that's all the way seated down, and then we'll tighten up these little clamp bolts. Works really well just to use the weight of the machine to put this thing back into place. Otherwise, you're really kind of fighting that spring tension trying to do it by hand. Makes it really difficult. All we've got left is caliper and our tie rod. See, right now, we got no wiggle on this wheel bearing, which is exactly what it's supposed to be. So another symptom of bad wheel bearings is it'll feel like the brakes need to be bled, because basically this is wiggling around and it's constantly kind of pushing this piston back into the caliper. So then when you go to hit your brakes, it's trying to squish this back out, as well as kind of straighten up this wheel. So when those wheel bearings are bad, it's constantly just screwing with the brakes too. So like this one had pretty much no braking power as well. You really had to pump the brakes just to get it to grab these fronts. And that's all due to all that extra play in this wheel bearing. Alright, now that we've got these wheel bearings replaced, we need to tackle the U-joints on this prop shaft. So the first thing we're going to do, drive this roll pin out. Basically, just use a punch and a hammer. We'll drive that thing out. In theory, this whole shaft should slide backwards and slide off the splines here and then be able to wiggle out through the front. But sometimes this yoke here likes to get stuck onto those splines. Or sometimes the same thing happens on the back side, but we'll see how this one is. So we got the roll pin driven out here, and I just kind of hit on this a few times, and this yoke definitely seems to be stuck onto the spline. Sometimes you can get lucky and heat this off. I just did one identical to this, so I know the way that we're going to do this. So what we're going to do here, though, is break this U-joint apart inside here and leave this yoke stuck on. So basically, on these style of U-joints, there's a snap ring on each side. This is the newer style U-joint. The older Sportsmans, they had a little clip that went more on the inside of the U-joint on each side. Principle is going to be the same though, but so we're going to pull these snap rings out and then drive these caps out each side and basically break this U-joint down so we can pull this shaft out, replace it, and then we're going to slide this back in and then do that final assembly right there. So I've got this driven back a little ways. So another pro tip is to jack up the rear end so that you can spin these rear tires to turn this prop shaft. So now you can see the cap on the other side is starting to push out. So I've got this out far enough. What I'm gonna do is just grab this with a vice grip and kind of spin it, and then pop that cap out, and then drive it back in the other way to pull the other cap out. So just like that, here's the cap from the other side. So now we'll just spin this around here. Basically hit from this side, drive the cap out the other side, and then this joint will be loose, and I should be able to slide the shaft out. All right, that's free now. So this shaft will kind of slide back a little bit, and then slide back out the front. So we might need to do a little tapping on the back side. So sometimes, depending on how bad it is, sometimes you need to take this footwell off to get access to that side of the joint to really kind of be able to pound on it if they're really kind of seized in there. But we'll wiggle on this one here a little bit, and hopefully we won't have to take this footwell off. Well, the shaft isn't wanting to budge here from that side, so we're going to pull this footwell off. So to do that, basically there's 4 Torx screws with a 7/16 nut on the bottom side, plastic rivet there, 2 more Torx, and basically this whole footwell will come off. And then right behind there, you'll see there's our prop shaft. All right, what do you know, more cow crap. So there's our other prop, or the other U-joint side. So we should be able to get a punch on it from right there and drive this thing off. Hopefully. I've had some in the past that have been so stuck on there I've had to like cut them out. Alright, that came off pretty easy. So now this shaft will just wiggle right out the front side. And there it is. Ideally, that yoke comes off with it too, and then you can just replace these U-joints on the bench in the vise, which is much easier. See how bad this one was. Pretty crazy. So we've got this on the bench here on the vise, so these are those U-joints. We're going to do the same thing. We'll pop these snap rings out there, and then drive the cups out both sides and just get these things fully eliminated out of there. Here's a better little close-up of what I'm doing there. So driving the cup down on that side, driving it out far enough on this side. We'll get a vice grip on it, wiggle it, and pull the cup off the other side. And then just drive it back up, do the same thing, get those joints out of there. And then once both the cups are out, the old cross comes out. Now it's time for some new joints. So here's my new U-joints. So these things can be cross-referenced to any Napa or auto parts store. So these ones here, it's a 72103 U-joint. I picked these up at O'Reilly's. This is a Tusk number for this joint as well. The older style, the one with the clips on the inner side of the cup, that is a 338 U-joint, which is super common. But kind of nice if you're in a bind, you can find these locally if needed. Now it's time to put in the new U-joint. So nice thing about all the aftermarket ones is they're greasable, which definitely makes them last longer. So little tip though, when you're pushing in the new cups, I like to use either the vise or a C-clamp or something like that to squeeze those ends together. You don't want to hit them with a hammer or tap them because the little needles inside there will fall down and then they get stuck inside there and you push the whole thing together and now all of a sudden you don't have enough clearance. So let's just finish putting this back together, push all these caps back in and put the snap rings back in, and this thing will be good to go again. Well, I've got everything else put together, but since we didn't get this yoke off, we're going to have to install this U-joint in place here. So same deal, put the caps on. So this is where you'll definitely have to use a C-clamp to put this back in place. So we'll put those caps back on, put the snap rings back in place, and then this prop shaft is done. Alright, this U-joint is all fixed and put back together. This prop shaft is done. No more play in it, no more noise. Just need to throw our footwheel back on and this thing's done. Originally didn't think this thing needed any rear wheel bearings, but sure enough, this side is bad as well. Left side seems okay, but we'll pull this wheel off and replace this wheel bearing as well. not much left of this wheel bearing as well. A lot of play at this thing. You can see what that cow crap does though. It just packs in everywhere on this thing. Alright, pretty much the same process as the front. Remove the hub. Same thing, brake disc back there. And then we'll unbolt this. A little bit easier on the rear than the front though. With the brake disc out of the way and this nut off, normally this hub will slide off. Right now this one's sticking on that wheel bearing, which is kind of common. So we're going to take this whole thing off in one piece at the moment. So we're going to remove each one of these bolts. Down here, there's a big old bushing that slides into this upright. So you'll kind of have to use the bolt to kind of wiggle that out and slide that piece out. This bolt just runs across, pretty simple there. This bottom bushing has got a big steel bushing down inside there that goes inside to this upright. So something that kind of works is basically use this bolt. If you kind of lay it in there a little loose, hit down at an angle, and it will slowly start working this out. These ones are super rusted in here because of that cow crap. Normally these don't come out that hard, so but you're gonna have to kind of work these out, get them out about a 1/4 inch or so, and then they'll slip out of this upright. Well, this side's being a real pain. It's really stuck in there, so we're just gonna burn these bushings out of there, and then the plastic part, replace them with some new ones. I guess if they're liquid, they can't be stuck in there. Alright, that's the bushing that was in there. Normally these do not come out this hard. Usually they just take a little bit of wiggling with the bolt and they slide out, but they're all rusted in there and everything. It's a different story. So, alright, we'll finish this other side and get this thing out of the way. Alright, we've got this thing off of here. So this hub is stuck down in the bearing. So we're just going to put a socket top side, kind of hold this up and drive that hub out of there so we can get this bearing out too. Okay, so finally got this hub off out of the upright and stuff, but that one of the bearing races is stuck on the hub, which is not too uncommon, unfortunately. Sometimes what I do here is I end up taking a Dremel and slitting that there to kind of relieve the pressure to pop this off. Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll work like a screwdriver down from the side to kind of pry up and try to kind of shimmy this race off of there. And you can see here, when that happens, all the balls and everything fall out of the bearing as well. So we're going to pull this snap ring off just like the other one, drive the bearing out, which sometimes it's a little more challenging when that race is not in there anymore. So yeah, this one normally should have been easier than the front, but it's taking a lot more effort than the fronts. Alright, we got the new bearing pushed in. We'll put a new bushing in on this side as well, since I melted the crap out of the other one there. And last thing to do is get this race off. So I think I'm going to try just prying on the edges and see if I can wiggle that thing up and around. Well, I'm having no luck pushing that race off. Tried to pry kind of from the side, couldn't do it. So, time to cut it off the Dremel. So we're going to take the cut-off disc and basically kind of cut it at an angle there and keep working down so we free this thing up. Alright, I've got that slit there, so what I can do now is get a screwdriver down there, punch, chisel, spread that apart, and then this race should finally pop off. Alright, there it is. Okay, we can finally put this thing all the way back together again. Well, the reinstallation process is basically the same. Put our bushings and stuff back in here, tighten that back up, put the bolt back in here, put our hub back on, brake caliper back on, and then we're done on this thing.